What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And the Giants made a couple more low-key moves last night, signed a couple of free agents, so we wanted to update you guys and let you know who they signed. First of all, safety, Jalen Mills, safety slash cornerback, just a defensive back is how I'd like to describe him. Jalen Mills, 30-year-old safety, signing over from the New England Patriots. You guys might remember him from when he was within our division, playing for the Philadelphia Eagles, was a 7th-round pick back in 2016. Versatile guy, moves around the defense. Of course, we know that the Giants needed to add depth at safety after losing Xavier McKinney, so now Mills will join the mix with Dane Belton and Jason Pinnock as one of the Giants' safeties. They also went ahead and they signed wide receiver Isaiah McKenzie, another player you guys might be familiar with because we've mentioned him a lot on the show as a potential target for the Giants over the last couple off seasons. He used to play for the Buffalo Bills, had his best years under Brian Daboll when Daboll was the offensive coordinator for Buffalo, so it always made sense that he would wind up with the Giants. It didn't happen last year. Now it happens. Not too much of a crazy signing here, a depth piece again, but we'll see how it goes. And last but not least, the piece of news that we will be discussing in this episode, the Giants are linked to another running back in free agency, Green Bay Packers runner A.J. Dillon. You might know him as the Quad Father, Quadzilla. I think this signing would be funny because the Giants would basically be going from the one running back with the largest quads to the second largest quads in the NFL with A.J. Dillon. We're going to go ahead and give you guys all the info on these three players, what it would mean for the Giants if they signed Dillon, what it means for the Giants if they did sign these other two guys, and everything else in between. But before we do so, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the channel if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, before I hand it off to you, Alex, I just want to remind everybody, or at least point it out to you if you didn't know, we are very close to 20,000 subscribers. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who's been tuning in this offseason, the love, the support, all the comments. It's been tremendous. We're really excited to keep pumping out all this Giants free agency and draft content for you guys. But if you could help us reach that 20K subs milestone, we'll really, really appreciate it. It goes a long way. So again, thank you guys for all the love and support recently. But without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And what is your reaction to some of these free agency moves that the Giants are making?
Well, I mean, we all know how big of a day Monday was, getting some offensive line pieces, Brian Burns, and Devin Singletary. And by the way, I really like Devin Singletary. I think people are giving him a bad rap, or at least some people. I mean, when you compare him to Saquon Barkley, of course, two different players, but Singletary is a good player. Like, traditionally, he's a lead back. He churns out yards. He always falls forward. He picks up first downs. I like him. And pairing him with A.J. Dillon or even a mid-round draft pick, which I also wouldn't be opposed to, would be a good scenario for the Giants. Why? I think the running back by committee approach is kind of what teams where the Giants need to be going. I think superstar running backs, luxury items like Saquon, luxury items like Derrick Henry are the last piece to the puzzle for a lot of teams. Kind of why the Ravens went out and got Derrick Henry. Kind of why, I think what Josh Jacobs went to the Packers. They feel good about what Jordan Love. And then, of course, you have Saquon going to the Eagles. I think like teams that feel as though they're that big luxury item away from winning football games or winning championships is where they go. They go and get that luxury running back. The Giants, however, are not in a position to be paying luxury running backs, and that's kind of what we saw happen and unfold this past week, I guess, really. And A.J. Dillon, the quad father, certainly offers you some decent production in terms of big body, first down, short yardage, goal line back. I like Devin Singletary in those roles anyway. I think he'd be fine. But if the Giants want to save a little bit of money, they probably could allocate like a 4th-round pick on like Audric Estime out of Notre Dame. Kind of a similar size, similar play style. Big guy, churns out extra yards, surprisingly fast or at least his game speed is surprisingly fast, correlating away from his NFL combine numbers that didn't really come back very strong. I think he's a productive back, and he's young. He's like 20 years old, 21 years old. So I like that about him. But, A.J. Dillon, if it was a cheap, like close to a veteran minimum deal, I wouldn't hate it. I think he probably gets somewhere in like the $2.5 million range per season. He kind of fell off, of course, the Packers really relied on Aaron Jones as their primary back. I don't think the Giants will be using A.J. Dillon more so as like a supplement if Devin Singletary went down or that short yards goal line opportunity type of guy. So I do like that. But, looking over at Jalen Mills is a backup to me. I don't view him as a starting safety or a defensive back at all. He played 459 snaps this past season with New England. He's a good run defender at the very least, but he's really poor in coverage. Does not traditionally perform well in those areas. He kind of he's listed as a safety now. He does have corner experience, so I do like that. This past season, he played 136 snaps at slot corner, 106 in the box, 159 at free safety, and 27 out wide. So the Giants are probably looking him as like kind of the Julian Love role they had a couple years ago. This utility defensive back who can, at the very worst, plug and play multiple positions, has experience all over the place. I don't view him as a starter. I'm probably like Pinnock is our starting strong safety right now. Maybe the Giants have Dane Belton. They saw enough from him at the end of the season to say, well, we like his development. Eventually, we need our mid-round picks to start panning out. Eventually, we need to lean into some of our own selections. So I do think that right now, the Giants have options, not all by Xavier McKinney level, not even close. But I like Jalen Mills as a utility piece, a Julian Love style player. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first, I want to get my thoughts on A.J. Dillon. You didn't ask me my thoughts on him, so I want to jump in and talk about A.J. Dillon for a second. So I think that there's this little bit of a narrative going around with some Giants fans who are like, oh, I don't want A.J. Dillon. He's too slow. He's not a workhorse back. He's not a three-down player. He's not supposed to be, guys. I think because of the last 5 or 6 years with Saquon Barkley, Giants fans have this image of what a running back looks like to them, and it's the superstar who does it all because that's what Saquon did. I mean, he was your short yardage back. He was your passing down back. He was everything for you. The Giants are now looking for running backs who are going to plug specific roles. So, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, goal line. Who else would you want out there other than a guy like A.J. Dillon? He's ginormous. He falls forward. He runs through people. He's just a power back in short yardage situations. The price tag doesn't matter because it's literally going to be a 1-year, probably $2 million deal. So a lot of Giants fans are like, I don't want A.J. Dillon. I want to sign a running back in the middle rounds. You can do both, or draft a running back. Draft a running back in the middle rounds. You can do both. You can bring in a running back in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, wherever you want to draft one, and you can have A.J. Dillon on your roster at a very cheap cost. Maybe he even gets cut in the preseason if you decide that the rookie's that much better. But having depth in the backfield when you don't have a superstar is paramount. The Giants don't need one lead rusher. They need rushers to fit specific molds. So they'll need to grab a guy like an A.J. Dillon, a veteran power back who could go in on short yardage situations and pick up those ugly yards. A.J. Dillon fits that role. I like this idea. I think that this makes a lot of sense from a financial perspective, going very cheap at the running back spot and getting a guy who is capable of pulling off specific short yardage plays. That's what I want from A.J. Dillon, and I think that if the Giants do end up signing him, he's probably going to score a lot more touchdowns than you might realize for the Giants in 2024 because, Alex, think about all the times where the Giants were getting down inside the 5-yard line, either struggling to score and kicking field goals, or it was handoffs to Saquon Barkley, and he was finding ways to get into the end zone. Now, life becomes a whole lot easier within those 5 yards to get into the end zone when you have a power back like A.J. Dillon, who just takes a short handoff, falls forward for a touchdown. That's what you're looking for in A.J. Dillon. Don't discount how valuable that can be. Meanwhile, of course, Devin Singletary is going to be your first and second down back on those long yardage situations. He's going to be the guy who's taking the bulk of the carries. But on those real short yardage plays, 4th and short, 3rd and short, that's where you want and kind of need a guy like an A.J. Dillon on your roster. The Giants didn't have an A.J. Dillon. They only ever had Saquon Barkley the last few years. I think that they should have had an A.J. Dillon on their roster while they had Saquon Barkley. They didn't. But now that they don't have Saquon, it's become even more important that they get a guy like this to pull off these specific plays in these specific situations. So I'm for A.J. Dillon. I like the idea. I think it would be a good signing. Again, it's going to be cheap, and it doesn't prevent you from going into the draft and adding more talent in the middle to late rounds at the running back spot. I don't really believe in Gary Brightwell. I know some Giants fans mentioned Gary Brightwell is still on this roster. Don't care. I don't even think he's making this roster. Eric Gray is another solid runner on a cheap rookie contract that I think they should continue to develop. But look at him. He's very small. That's your 3rd down running back. That's your 3rd and long. You need somebody to go out there and be a receiving back out of the backfield. He was okay as a receiver at Oklahoma, but I think part of the reason the Giants had Eric Gray featured so prominently as a return man, they were first of all, trying to develop his vision in open field situations. Second of all, I think trying to get him better at catching the football, turning upfield, and making plays. So that's what I like from Eric Gray. He'll be your 3rd down back. Your 1st and 2nd down back will be Devin Singletary. Your short yardage power back, that could be A.J. Dillon or whoever the Giants add in that role. But this just tells me that the Giants are looking to do a complete running back by committee. Think back, guys, when the Giants had Ahmad Bradshaw, they had Brandon Jacobs. Ahmad Bradshaw was first and second down, and oftentimes on third down, Brandon Jacobs on those short yardage situations when they needed to run with power. And they also had, what was his name, DJ Ware, I believe, for a few of those seasons. He was also one of their power backs in those short yardage situations, sometimes their third down back. So having three solid rushers, three guys who can run the ball at a capable level is really important for the Giants. Keeps Devin Singletary fresh, keeps these other guys healthy. Running back by committee, that's going to be the approach this season. I think that much has been made readily apparent to us. I wouldn't discount this A.J. Dillon potential signing just because he's slow or because he's not versatile and he's not an every down back. He's not supposed to be. The Giants are going to be looking at this guy purely as a third down, fourth down, short yardage guy, and a red zone goal line guy. And I think that he could do those things really well because he has for the Green Bay Packers, and he's built like a brick house. So he could definitely make those short yardage plays. Now, talking about Jalen Mills, Alex, my opinion on him, I do also like this signing because, again, cheap one-year deal for a veteran who fits a specific role. This is not a starting player. This is not a guy who's going out there and filling all these different roles at a high-quality level. However, the Giants, as I've been mentioning on the show, under Shane Bowen, are going to play a lot more zone coverage, and they're going to play a lot more nickel and dime packages, meaning 5 to 6 defensive backs on the field. When you have 6 defensive backs on the field, you better have some damn depth. Jalen Mills is quality depth. He can move around. He can play slot cornerback. He played out wide for the majority of his career with the Philadelphia Eagles. Recently, he switched over to play safety for the majority of his snaps in 2023. So this is one of those guys who, when you're moving into that dime package and you just need to get 6 players out on the field in that defensive backfield, you want a guy like Jalen Mills who can play more than one of those positions. Let's say you're getting into that dime package, you have an injury at free safety. Mills can play it. You have an injury at outside corner. Mills can play it. Slot corner. Mills can play it. Even strong safety. So this is one of those utility pieces, as you mentioned, Alex, but I think he's really an important signing for the Giants because, first of all, he's a cheap signing. Second of all, he is a player who helps the Giants add depth at a position which is pretty thin. I like some of the guys they have there. I love Dane Belton. I think that he is ready for that starting role. I hope he is. I really like Jason Pinnock. And I like Jervarius Owens. Let's see if the Giants continue to develop him. But 3 safeties is not enough. They had to have added a fourth in Jalen Mills. They still need to add probably a 5th guy in there as well, considering how much dime package and nickel package defense they're planning on playing this upcoming season with all this zone coverage that Shane Bowen likes to deploy. So they added Jalen Mills. I don't think they're done. I think they'll probably look to add another safety this offseason, whether it be through free agency or the draft. The Giants have to keep adding defensive backs to this team. In fact, I think their next signing that they make should be a cornerback. That's quickly becoming the biggest need on the Giants defense right now, I would say. And if they don't find a way to address it with a solid, capable veteran starter in free agency, it's going to become a pretty high priority position of need for the Giants once we get over to draft season. So cornerback should be the next thing that they address. But again, Jalen Mills has experience playing corner, so he can also provide as one of those backups, depth pieces at the cornerback spot as well. But I love how he adds depth to pretty much every position in the defensive backfield, and I do like the fact that if you need him to start in a pinch or you need him out there on specific personnel packages, Jalen Mills can provide you with some quality snaps at a high level, or at least a decently high level for a veteran defensive back in this league. So I like that signing. I like the idea of A.J. Dillon. Both of those potential moves, I think they're great. Again, they're not flashy. We are not talking about a Brian Burns trade. We're not talking about an offensive lineman being signed to a multi-year deal here, but we are talking about the Giants finding specific players to play specific roles, bringing them in and filling out their roster on cheap contracts is a very important part of the process. It's moves like this that really do make a difference once you get to weeks 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18 in the NFL season. Depth is paramount. Having ready bodies and available players throughout the season is important. That's what the Giants are doing here, just adding some guys to the back end of the roster, and I am all for it.
Absolutely. I mean, look, depth has been a major problem for the Giants over the last couple of years. Guys like Jalen Mills add depth to the situation. You mentioned Javarius Owens, a guy that the Giants took late round last year out of Houston, I believe. Really solid player, good instincts. He's not going to blow you away with his athletic profile, but he's experienced. He's a good run stopper, decent player. So we'll see how they keep developing some of these guys. They have one of the best DB coaches in Jerome Henderson in the game. So you have to estimate that at least one of these guys pans out. I think Dane Belton was really set back by that clavicle break he had in his rookie season and fighting his way back. Basically, he missed his whole rookie year. Last year was kind of like his de facto rookie season, and he didn't even play that much. So you kind of have to sit here and ask ourselves, is a guy like Dane Belton, eventually you need to get some value out of a player like this, mid-round pick. I think that we're going to see a lot more of him in this upcoming season, and Jalen Mills obviously provides competition at the very least. There are other players out there the Giants will probably look for. There are even some good draft selections, maybe in the third or fourth round. They may want to add as competition here. Now, I'll say this. Think about the Jets. I'll use the Jets as an example as to where they invested their money and draft capital and how their defense has legitimate elite upside, right? I think most people would agree, Anthony. Like you probably say, like the Jets defense is one of the top in football, right? You'd probably assume so. You want to know who their starting safety was last year? Undrafted free agent Tony Adams. And before that, Ashton Davis. They don't invest at the safety position. They actually, to be quite honest with you, they don't give two craps about it. They consistently avoid spending money or spending draft capital at free safety. I think that not every team follows this. Not every team follows this. But again, you have two great cornerbacks in DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner, makes up for it twofold. Jordan Whitehead was their starting strong safety. He's also like average level player. It's kind of interesting to see though, like teams traditionally, or maybe not, I wouldn't say traditionally, but you can see how teams develop great defenses without spending big at safety, right? You get two great cornerbacks, and I think you and I would agree, Deontay Banks has the same upside as any CB1 in football. The guy has the upside to be a really great player. If the Giants can go find a good CB2 long-term, even if it's not this season, this offseason, but maybe next offseason, grab a good CB2, I think that, they're building out their pass rush. Dexter Lawrence is like kind of the equivalent to the Quinnen Williams on the Jets. Brian Burns was the equivalent to like a Bryce Huff. He's better than Bryce Huff. And then you have Kayvon Thibodeau, who like could be a better version of like, let's say like Will McDonald, or like he could be better than Carl Lawson, which I think he already is. But, then you have a linebacker. I think Bobby Okereke is better than CJ Mosley at this point in his career, and I think that's not even a debate. So I think right now the Giants are building this team kind of the way the Jets are. They're trying to find those great cornerbacks, get a really great pass rush, have a good linebacker core. I really like Quincy Williams for what it's worth. Dude's an absolute tank. Like last year, really great player for the Jets. But I think that you kind of see what I'm trying to get at, right? Like they didn't invest big at safety. There is a way to build a great defense without over-investing at the safety position. Maybe that's the angle the Giants are trying to play. And for what it's worth, I think Pinnock is better than Jordan Whitehead. So, there are ways to compare and contrast. What do you think about that though? The fact that the Jets have managed to build an elite top 5 defense without investing at free safety, it can be done. Again, the Giants are far from that in terms of they need another great cornerback to pair with Deontay Banks, but I don't think it's impossible to say they could mirror that type of strategy.
Sure, they could. I think that some fans are going to be like, please stop comparing the Giants to the Jets and using the Jets as a blueprint on how to build a football team. That's kind of one thing that rings in my head, Alex. But you are right in the sense that they do have a great defense, a great defensive lineup, and they don't necessarily have a whole lot invested at the safety position. I could also counter and say, hey, how about the Baltimore Ravens? They took a safety in the first round a couple seasons ago. They got Kyle Hamilton. He's an absolute stud. He's been a big part of the success of their defense. So there's many different ways to build a defensive scheme. There are so many ways to kind of slice it. You could say, all right, let's go heavy on the defensive backfield. Let's go light on the front seven. And it's worked for teams. I think of a team kind of like, if you want to talk Legion of Boom, the Seattle Seahawks years ago. They had everything invested at safety. Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor. They had Richard Sherman and a couple other really good cornerbacks. They also have Bobby Wagner in the middle of their defense, but their defensive line wasn't exactly the most standout and notable unit on that team. It was the defensive backfield, primarily that safety tandem. So there are different ways to build the defense and find success. The Giants are just taking a different approach. They're not going with the Legion of Boom elite secondary approach. They're trying to build a good secondary. They've got Deontay Banks. We'll see what else they add to that mix, but they're going with the front seven being the focal point. This is a really underrated aspect of this front seven, Alex, in my opinion, is the fact that they have two really good inside linebackers. Over the past few days, we've been talking a lot oh, we've got this sick duo now with Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns. We still have Dexter Lawrence in the interior, and we have Azeez Ojulari as a rotational pass rusher. Look at that four-man rush. That's sick. That is true. We are right about that. But we got to get to that second level. You still have Micah McFadden and Bobby Okereke. Okereke looked like he should have been an All-Pro last year. He got snubbed. Micah McFadden was developing into a really solid pro. So the Giants not only have 4 solid pass rushers, one of them being one of the best run defenders in the NFL as well with Dexter Lawrence, they also have a great second level with Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden. Now, they still need depth. They still need to add more interior defensive linemen for sure. I think that if you're looking at the third round of this year's draft, that's probably where they're going to have to take a defensive lineman. But maybe they also believe in a guy like a Jordan Riley to step up and be the interior defender alongside Dexter Lawrence. I think that's also a possibility. But I will say, back to your original point here of how the Jets have built their defense, another counterpoint that I will make is, well, they got Robert Saleh and a great defensive staff coaching them. That is true. You do have to acknowledge coaching and situation matters. For the Giants, maybe they have a great defensive coordinator. Maybe they don't. We don't know that yet. Shane Bowen has been really good with the Tennessee Titans in the past, but we don't want to get our hopes up, right? Because we've done this in the past. We've been like, oh, the Giants just hired this coach. Everything is fixed. We're going to see big steps forward from these players. Everything's going to be great. We've duped ourselves before. I'm taking the wait and see approach with Shane Bowen because I don't really know what his defense is going to look like here. I know what it looked like with the Tennessee Titans. However, a lot of Mike Vrabel influence. Was that Bowen's defense? Was that Vrabel's defense? It was probably more Vrabel's defense and Bowen helping him run it. But how is it going to look here with the Giants? A lot of different personnel. I mean, if you're looking at these guys, Thibodeau and Brian Burns, how do they stack up with the Titans pass rushers? Very different types of players. I mean, I don't see a comparison to Harold Landry and Danico Autry with these two players. I see a much different approach here. So are the Giants building something very similar to what the Titans had, or are they building something of their own? It looks like it's going to be more something of their own, and they're going to bring over some of the packages that they had in Tennessee. But overall, Tennessee had solid corners. They had really good safety play as well before they traded away Kevin Byard. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what this defense is going to look like and how it's going to take shape. I'm going to have to do more research on that, and I'm sure that we will once we get past the draft and have a greater look at what this defense is going to actually look like in the starting 11. But one of the things that I will say, they are building through the trenches right now, the Giants. They're adding talent up front. Yes, it's something that the New York Jets have done recently, but they also do have really good cornerbacks. The Giants really desperately need to find somebody opposite Deontay Banks. I love the fact that they've got Brian Burns now. I love the fact that you've got Burns, Dexter, and Kayvon. That's phenomenal. But in the secondary, there is not a whole lot of talent. And no disrespect to the guys that are there. You guys know how high I am on Deontay Banks, how high I was on him before he even wore Giants blue, right? Been a big fan of his. And you guys know that I do like players like Dane Belton and Jason Pinnock. But realistically, the Giants need more talent in that secondary, especially at CB2. I'm really curious to see how they go ahead and address that, Alex. But I do want to get your thoughts on that. I gave my thoughts there on kind of how the Giants are building this defense. But looking at this big need that the Giants are leaving themselves with, we haven't heard a whole lot of conversation about them targeting cornerbacks. What's the plan here, do you think? Do you think that it is to go in free agency, or are you starting to feel how I am, where I'm thinking that cornerback might become a top priority for the Giants once we get over to draft season at this point?
I mean, right now, the Giants obviously need another cornerback. I will say this, the market has been very slow for the free agent corners. It's very deep. There's a lot of options. I think the Giants probably are waiting to see what shakes free, trying to find some value players, value grabs, figure out, and to be honest with you, today the new league year starts at 4 p.m. We're probably going to learn something about either Darren Waller or restructures very soon in a couple hours. So if the money that opens up allows them to spend a little bit at CB, I think they might. Maybe they even decide, hey, we could find a decent slot cornerback in the draft and kick Cordell Flott out to cornerback too. Maybe that's something that they're considering. Is that my preference? Not necessarily, but we kind of have to work with what we have right now, and the Giants might be looking for some developmental talent there. So we'll see how it goes. But I think that the cornerback market is so deep that there will be some nice value grabs at the bottom end, and the Giants may be able to capitalize on something that's a good scheme fit for them. So we'll see how they operate there, but the draft always is an opportunity. I think right now, though, look, if the Giants don't end up getting a quarterback, I could see them going receiver out in the first round and then cornerback in the second round. That's totally something I can see them doing if they decide that they don't want to go cornerback in the first. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. If you end up with a guy like Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze and the top cornerback on the board at 47, so be it. Maybe even trade up a couple spots and get your guy if there's someone you really like there. So maybe you just go really young across the board. You have a superstar, receiver and Malik Neighbors at the college level. Hopefully that translates. And then you have Dante Banks in his second year and a rookie cornerback opposite of him. And you really reset that market. You have Brian Burns on a 5-year deal. You still got Kayvon Thibodeau for another 3 controllable seasons. Dexter Lawrence and Andrew Thomas have another 4 seasons, 5 seasons on their deals as well. You got all your primary guys locked up for 5 years, right? 3 to 5 years. So you have time to develop these players, get the quarterback, and then go. Maybe this is a world, Anthony, where the Giants don't get a quarterback and they look for a veteran. Maybe they look for like a guy that's like, on a bad team, they acquire them, like kind of what the Rams did with Matthew Stafford. Is that a potential option long term to find a guy that's really solid veteran, undervalued on another team, acquire him, and then have them start at a team that's ready to win now? There are multiple ways to win championships. I know drafting the quarterback would be the preferable option, but when it comes to Joe Shane, we've kind of seen him use some unorthodox ways to build this team. So I'm not ruling anything out long term. My preference. I love Jaden Daniels. Would I be happy with Drake May? Absolutely. But this is just the reality that we live in. It may not be a possibility. Maybe they do go JJ McCarthy at 6. We're going to have a long discussion about this very soon after we kind of get through free agency and everything. We'll discuss about, what the probability is, the risks and the pros and cons of JJ McCarthy. A lot of people are very up in the air about him, whether it's on the side of the fence that no, he's a reach at 6, or yes, I would like him because of his tools and translatable traits that Brian Daboll may be able to capitalize on. So there's a lot of discussion to have leading up to the draft, that's for sure. But right now the Giants do have needs, cornerback and safety being 2 of them. I think everything else kind of situated until we get to draft day, and then we kind of figure it out from there. But, at the same time, Anthony, you always have to keep in mind, even if the Giants don't go into the season with a CB2, teams cut a lot of good players. We got Pinnock, basically for free, and he's a starting strong safety for us. Teams cut good players because of cap situations, because of this, because of that. So maybe we end up getting a CB2 around that time of the year when teams are trying to shake guys loose, and we'll see what happens. And there's a lot to happen still, and I think the Giants are being smart and cautious instead of overspending and reactionary at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, they're being frugal, which is important. You don't want them to kind of waste up all their future cap space, adding a bunch of talent for this season when, let's be honest, we know that we're not going to be a Super Bowl contender this season. So the Giants are being careful and they're being cautious as they should be. However, they do need a starting cornerback too. They don't have one right now, I don't believe. Listen, I like Cordell Flott. I think he could be great in the slot, maybe as a CB2 one day. Still needs to develop. Feel the same way about Trey Hawkins. Still needs to develop. The Giants need to bring in a veteran at that cornerback spot. And even if they do address it early on, I would love for them to address with cornerback, because I really like this CB class. I think it's loaded with talent. If a guy like a Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama falls somehow to 47, there's kind of debate. Maybe he goes in the first round. Maybe he falls into round 2. I've been seeing it kind of go both ways for Kool-Aid McKinstry. We'll see once we get closer to draft season where his stock lands. But if a guy like that, or there's other players in this draft class too, there's a lot of cornerback talent. And I think there's going to be a run on corners in round 2. So if the Giants like a guy at 47, go for it, go ahead and pick that guy. I think that could be a really solid option for them in the second round, depending on how they go in the first round. One thing that I want to address that you mentioned, potentially building this team up and then making some sort of splash trade next year for a quarterback, it's an option. Maybe it's the best, maybe it's not. I don't know. I think that's more of a fallback plan, though. I think the Giants are going to want to try and find their own guy to groom and develop who's young and make him the future of the franchise long term. But if they can't find that guy, yeah, I think that trading for somebody next offseason might be a viable option, but we'll have to see once we get there. And then kind of the last point that you made about picking players up on the waiver wire, definitely another viable option, something that the Giants will need to monitor once they get to preseason. But I do think this is a need they need to address well before preseason. They need to add some talent to this cornerback room just so that they can have a good shape of what it's going to look like before we get to the draft. Now, the final point that I'll make is you mentioned trades for quarterbacks, you mentioned waiver wire for cornerbacks, How about trades for cornerbacks? Let's kind of combine these two things. I think that there is a possibility out there that maybe a team is looking to move on from a veteran player, clear a little bit of cap space, and just acquire a late round draft pick. We've just seen a couple of solid veterans get traded for late picks. Joe Mixon went over to the Texans for, I believe it was a 7th round pick. Defensive tackle, I think it was Grover Stewart, somebody also got traded for a 7th round pick. These are veteran players who, yes, are past their prime, but in a new team, new change of scenery, if you've got a position of need to address and you just need some stability with a veteran, maybe the Giants look and do that, and they find a cornerback who's on the market who can kind of fill in at corner or in the starting lineup rather. So that's also a possibility. We'll see exactly how the Giants choose to address this position. But like you said, Joe Schoen likes to get creative. Let's not discount the fact that he might get very creative with the rest of this offseason leading into the draft, especially when we're talking about quarterback and whether or not the Giants are going to trade up, trade down. Who knows what's going to happen. But yeah, I think that pretty much rounds out all the news so far. We didn't talk too much about Isaiah McKenzie, but just to give you guys the kind of quick bullet points on that, he's a backup receiver. He's a camp body. We'll see if he makes the team. He gives you depth at the receiver spot. His best years were with Brian Dable, and he also gives you depth at kick returner. The Giants did just agree to terms with Gunnar Olszewski as their return specialist, punt and kick returner. But if he has any injuries or whatever happens with him, now they have Isaiah McKenzie, who's just going to be around and available for them through training camp. If he plays well, maybe he makes the roster at the back end. But this isn't a player you should expect to see on the field a whole lot. Giants do have some decisions ahead of 4 o'clock. As Alex mentioned, new league year. They're going to have to make some restructurings or some cuts, something, because right now they are over the cap. We'll probably update you maybe with another video later on today or maybe tomorrow. We'll keep you guys in the loop on anything that the Giants do with their salary cap space, but they do have to make some moves, so stay tuned for that to our social medias, to EmpireSportsMedia.com. We'll, of course, give you guys all the news regarding the Giants and their salary cap space. But that pretty much wraps this one up. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
TVSO.